Hello, hello, everyone. All right, so today we have Yahaira Lopez. She is one of the founding members of the South-End Roxbury Community Partnership. She also runs this group called Autism Sprinter. I believe they provide services to parents and families dealing with autism. But without further ado, I would like her to get more into her work.
Hey
Yeah.
guys, how are you? How are you? Like Jeremy says, my name is Yahaira Lopez. First, I'm a mom of two amazing little boys, one who's on the autism spectrum and another who has ADHD. So my house is always like super chaotic, but like a fun chaotic. Like it's never a dull moment in this house. And they keep this mama on her toes. Like literally, I'm on my toes all the time. And I founded Autism Sprinter back in 2014. And it started because when I as a mom, a Latina mom navigating disability and getting the diagnosis of autism was a super culture shock to me. It wasn't something that I grew up talking about at my dinner table that we talked about disability. So it just felt super weird. And I found myself like isolated from the world. Like I felt lonely. I felt like I wonder how many families in marginalized communities, uh, families who don't speak English as their first language, dealing with a disability and having to connect with so many providers to get information and how to help your child with a disability was it was stressful. And so I was taking a lot of my stressors and venting on Facebook. And two of my closest friends, one that I grew up with in the South End, goes, Jaddy, I need you to start a blog. And I'm like, yo, I don't know nothing about blogging. I don't even know, like, I'm not one of these super like language arts teacher type of person. I don't know about this.
Yeah.
And then another friend of mine that I went to college with was like, no, you need to help, our community, our Black and Brown Latino community, because you're probably the only person I see on Facebook all the time talking about this, like super raw and uncut. So I started a Google blogger, couldn't maintain it. I don't know what I was doing. So then my college friend was the one. So huge shout out to Edwin Frias, who literally bought me the domain for Autism Sprinter.
Mm-hmm.
Paid for it for a few years, actually.
Well, I was like the first angel
Yeah,
investor. Yeah.
yo,
Yeah,
I
that's
was
what's
like,
up. That's that. Community shows out to support each other, especially our business owners. That's a
mm-hmm,
perfect example of that.
yeah. And he has his own free as love shirt line, and so he bought it, paid for it for a few years. He like literally helped, he literally did everything, the website, all of it. Like he took on that charge and he was like, basically, like, here, I got you, make it happen. He taught me how to get the EIN number and all this other stuff. So it was amazing. And then I kind of just took it from there.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the work that we do at Autism Sprinter is provide family support, parent to parent support. We host, because of COVID, things are different, but we usually host monthly workshops, seminars, whatever the parents come up with, honestly, because the parents are like literally on the driver's seat of the work that we do. We typically do things here in the town of Randolph, in Boston. We're kind of like wherever parents hit us up and be like, we need you to come here. We would like to have a conversation. And we're like, okay, we're there. And we have a Facebook group with constant, family to family support. Because of COVID, we've kind of taken a lot of the virtual world. So if anybody visits our Facebook page, you'll find free 99 workshops and seminars to you on special education, caring for your children, so PCA, like you can find all that, literally family partner, all that related information on our public page. and they're free. You can watch them anytime. Host watch parties, and then a lot of what we do is we really work with parents on building their voice. We help parents organize, which is a big thing that we like to do, is that we help parents how to organize other parents so that they can start showing up collectively to school committee meetings when they're having issues around special education in their district, school district, or, you know, how to attend, you know, their town council or city council meetings regarding issues that are around disability and school related matters and, you know, budget. So we do a lot of that work. And most importantly, you know, we just put the voices out there of the parents and those that have autism. So we're just a very grassroots led organization. We became a nonprofit officially in 2015. And I would
I was just going
say,
to ask you that, like,
yeah.
how are you guys like run? Are you guys running completely on like donations as a nonprofit? Do you provide services over? Yeah.
Jeremy, I was literally just about to get into that, right?
Ooh,
So
spicy.
we ran our first literally 5 years
Mhm.
funding our own programs, our own events, literally through the help of other parents that would say, hey, I'm going to bring some pizza. Hey, I'll bring some cake. Like literally 5 years, we did this all alone. And I would say in the last 2 years, 3 years, I would say almost 4 years, we kind of did it on our own. And then the last 2 years is when finally I said, you know what? I have to take some of my tax money. I have to hire a grant writer because I had no clue what I was doing. We would write grants. We were getting little grants of like $500 here, $1,000 there. But I mean, that goes fast. So finally hired a grant writer. And in the last 2 years, we've been able to get donations. We're not a fully funded program. I'm gonna keep it all the way real. We're not fully funded. We are a very personal group of parents, and we like to keep things small and intimate. So we get enough funding to just make magic happen, literally. Would I like to be, would I like to have my own building or a space? Absolutely. And I would hope one day that we can get there. But for right now, we kind of like being small, intimate, and getting the funding that needs to happen to make, the work move forward.
Yeah, that's real. I wonder, can you get more into like the specific financial struggles faced by faced by family members, dealing with disabilities or just other I don't want to say handicaps, but other let's say like just families faced with
able people.
Yes, other differently able people.
Yeah.
Can you get more into like what that financial struggle looks like? Because you talked about a lot about like searching around for different providers. What is that like doing it on your own and still working? What kind of pressure is put on these different families?
So I'll start with something that I always like to talk about on the organization part. Being one of very few disability organizations led by women of color, I'm surprised that we're not fully funded, right? Because we're in the streets, we're in the hood, we're a very targeted organization. And we see so many nonprofits, and a lot of them doing disability work are not in the communities of color.
True. Very
so
true.
I need people to pay attention to that. The other part is kind of to talk about what you're saying is the financial part of raising somebody with a disability is difficult. You have different types of people. You have families who receive Social Security benefits. It's fixed income, right? You get this monthly check that comes in that ranges between $700 and something dollars, that I guess when you become an adult, it goes up to like $1,000 and something dollars. Literally once a month at the beginning of the month or the second week of the month, that's all you have for the whole entire month, literally. So imagine someone, especially an adult with a disability, because I think that's where the major concern is. Imagine you being an adult with a disability with a fixed income of, like, let's say $1,200 a month. Your rent is about, let's say, $700 to $1,000 a month, depending if you live in subsidy, if you don't, whatever. Because that's a whole other conversation that we need to tackle. There's probably going to be another episode, right?
Yeah, most likely. This is that when we get to SSI and stuff like that. That's a much deeper topic, especially when we
Yep.
talk about like
Housing.
the cap on work.
Yep.
And I know, not to cut you off, but I went to English high school, right? And they have this program where they allow, the differently able to work. But they can only work a certain amount of hours. They can only work 20 hours.
They can work no more than 20 hours.
Exactly, a week. And it's kind of sad, because it's like no part-time job is going to pay you more than $20 an hour that I've seen, period. Right. And so it puts this incredible burden on not only the families, but on the people, on these people themselves, right? Because it's not like they're not, cognizant of their own existence. Like, they know that they exist, they know that they hear it, and they can see that they're stuck in a system, right? It's just that they're viewed differently. And I really wonder what kind of mental struggle that is. And I feel like you said, that's gonna be needed to tackle. Like, we're gonna need to tackle that in another episode, most likely.
And we have, if you go on on the Facebook, we've had two this month. For April, we had three guests, one who's an adult person with autism who rents a room, and he talked about those burdens. And basically Chris Hall from the Computers of Autistic Foundation basically says that he barely even has money for food after he pays for his room. He rents a room. In addition to paying a room, you still got to pay electricity. If you need Wi-Fi, your cell phone, we all know technology is a big thing, right? So you have to have at least the most recent or a very upgraded phone to making sure that you can actually access any personal or very important stuff. And that doesn't include needing some form of laptop, iPad, or something of that nature to do work or research or watch Netflix or something, for those that may not own a TV, right? So there's like a huge barrier just on this conversation alone, but there are major stresses. And the same thing goes for those that live in subsidy, right? So I get this check. If I go work, my rent's going to go up. Social Security is going to go down. They're going to take my food stamps away if I get food stamps, right?
Yep.
And then what? Right. And I think that people completely forget about this conversation. And the same thing goes to parents. There are parents who stay home because they have no choice to stay home to care for their child who may be in a wheelchair, and they have to be all hands on deck. Right. So if that parent, goes to work, their rent is going to increase. They'll lose some of the Social Security benefits. Right. And then it just kind of feels like families in this space have literally no option. Like there's even a thing where for those that receive Social Security benefits, right, you can't have no more than $2,000 in your bank account. You can't have more than $2,000 saved. So how are we really helping people with disability to really live independently where they can't even save money for, let's say, if they do want to become homeowners? But they can't save no more than $2,000, and they can't work no more than 20 hours if they want to receive Social Security. So we're already putting them in a box,
right? And this
is for them not to grow
at all, right? Like, my aunt, she has a mess, right? She went from working at Suffolk Law School, making, I think this is circa late 1990s. This woman was making over $25 an hour in the 1990s, right? She gets hit with MS, and now she's stuck at home. And now they got her, they got my aunt drugged up on morphine, and she's becoming completely reliant on morphine. This also kind of ties into like the mile talk, but they kind of the only reason why she still has really housing right now is because my grandmother owns the house, and she just helps kind of pay bills. But the SSI won't let her work, won't let her really do anything. So she's literally surviving on different gifts. On selling her own products, things like, she started making in-home soap. She gardens, and that's what keeps her for sanity mostly. And then they engage in the community in that way. But it's an extreme burden that is put on families, and honestly, I'm glad that you're on here speaking about this, because this is also a message to other financial advisors, to the people who think you can save your way out of poverty. The system is not designed for you to do so.
No, it's true. And
um,
people got to think about that, because even when I had to quit my job
mhm,
back in 2014, which was around August when I had started Autism Sprinter, was because I was working for public school, right? I'm dropping one kid off at daycare. My other son was in school because he qualified for educational plan. So I had one kid in daycare, one in public school, me working. My days were a mess. Like I was on stressed out 1,000, right? Like it was, my weight was just fluctuating. A lot of other like medical issues, that I don't feel comfortable talking about just yet. But I was going through it, and I decided that, for my mental sanity, I needed to take care of my son, because my son wasn't really talking too much. He still required a lot of help or whatever. And so I made that decision. First of all, just to even sign up for help, I felt so humiliated and degraded sitting in these office asking for help for someone who's worked all my life, right? And they're telling me what I can and can't do, and how basically their money is going to dictate how I live and how I eat.
right.
I one of the ones, I went with my mom, and I could not stop crying. My mother's like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I feel so humiliated being here." Because just the questions that they ask you and the things that they basically, it's like a whole bunch of no's. It's like, you can't even have a car because that's considered luxury. You can't have cable. That's considered luxury.
Mm.
What? And it just so disconnected from reality.
I definitely feel you there, because when I was younger, me and my mom were looking for shelters, right?
Mhm,
We ended up staying at this motel for a while out in Brighton, right between the IHOP and McDonald's. So they send a lot of
mhm, mhm,
moms.
mhm,
Shout out to the Bridge program where my mom worked too, because she definitely taught me about a lot about the housing system. But the system that you go through, the systems that are in place in Boston, and Boston's supposed to be one of the best ones in the United States, right? Is still humiliating and degrading just to go through. Um, the level of intrusion in your life, and then where you still end up, it it kind of promotes this depression in people. And from there, I want to segue us into, more so like your work with Methadone Mile, right? Because the system is all interconnected, right?
yeah.
From a system that's overly intrusive to the depression that you face within it, and kind of how that might lead to someone to addiction, or how that might already further someone's addiction, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
And
can you talk more about your work with Methadone and Methadone Mile?
so, first of all, people need to hear this. The school to prison pipeline, if you look at the school to prison pipeline, it's typically kids who were receiving special education services,
Mhm.
kids who started getting medication for ADHD.
Right, and
They
kids
just
in
things
IAP
kind of
classes.
trickled into other things, right? Many of the people that are on mass and cast, what will always be known as Methadone Mile, because of the origin of how many methadone clinics are in a 5-mile radius in one community. So I need people to understand that. So we need to stop this whole NIMBY situation, because that's equally as disrespectful and stigmatizing as the community referencing a location based off its origin. So since we want to get technical with that. A lot of the people on Mass and Cast were people who were navigating some issues in school, whether it was mental health, behavior issues, um, families who were navigating addiction, families who were navigating, someone in their family being in prison, real life issues, right?
Right.
And some people who probably didn't have to go through none of that. They just started smoking something and it turned into something else. But majority of the people you meet there come with some trauma that led them to this space. And a lot of the work that we've been doing, me, Domingos De Rosa, Marla Smith, Leon, Dave, it's Damati,
Nancy.
we're a squad, Nancy,
Yeah.
Tati, it's a squad of us.
Mhm.
And we're out there because we're advocating for a comfortable community for all. And why we're saying comfortable for all is because, one, the city of Boston, former Mayor Marty Walsh approved during a global pandemic a comfort station where people are allowed to inject themselves with an illegal substance that they buy, illegal or drug, to have a place where they can comfortably inject themselves with this illegal substance. We don't see nothing comfortable about that. The
Absolutely.
space, it was, and you've seen it, Jeremy, right? It's a space that has literally a space that has gates.
Yep.
It's not even closed off, so anybody can see it. It's outside, first of all. So if you drive through there, there's no privacy, right? It's
If I'm
on
not
city of
mistaken,
Boston
there's already
property.
been a few deaths inside of the quote
Yeah,
unquote comfort station.
16 stabbings, two which have resulted in homicides, and not to mention that we have Ashley Tenzar Kiran, who is the mother of Damian Hughes, who's part of our group, her son was brutally stabbed to death on July 31st, right at the door of the Southampton shelter and the comfort station. Literally at like 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and I remember hearing this story when we were out there protesting. When kudos again to the group for being able to shut down such a major intersection. But I definitely don't want to take away from her pain. Yeah, I remember when she was describing that situation. It's like there's no police intervention, right? And this is honestly like this is a metaphor for like a larger problem within communities of color, where we're over policed and under policed at the same damn time. We're over policed for the wrong things, and then we're under policed when we actually need help, right? In the sense that her son was stabbed right to death in front of her at a comfort.
And let me just add, I don't mean to cut you off, by someone, since we're having trespassing conversations lately, by someone who was issued a trespassing order and a banned order from being in this location, meaning this person was not supposed to be in this location because of the history and patterns of aggressive behavior that was unmanageable. Mind you, Jeremy, there's a police officer that parks across the street.
No, we all see him, especially when we out there giving food. Or shoot, I was just with Nancy 20 minutes ago and we still saw him because I had dropped off some clothes and shoes. But yeah, like it's real interesting, right? They'll sit there, they'll eat their McDonald's or whatever inside the squad car and let everything happen. I remember when we were out there 2 weeks ago, me, Jacob, Nancy, and the whole squad, right? All out there, and the fight breaks out right at the gas station, right? The manager closes the doors. The security guard's not doing nothing because he's scared. The fight ends up going outside of the gas station, and the police officer station right outside of the gas station, right across the street, is watching it all go down, and he's not doing anything, right? He's just sitting there. And it's like there's this whole chaos going on, and he doesn't intervene in anything until like everything's already settled and over and done with.
And the crazy part about this whole thing is that I think that they're fed up, right? Like, I don't really have smoke with the police. I just want things to make sense, right? Because I understand in one hand, like they tell us, right, that they've literally told us that they can't do anything, right? Because one, individuals are not being prosecuted for a lot of the stuff that are going down there. And we've seen it. We've seen the first day that we did a demonstration, someone went to jail, was arrested, this whole big commotion, was sent to Boston Medical Center. I'm assuming he was evaluated. And by the end of the demonstration, he was back with snacks, eating food, no shoes on, no nothing. And we're like, what just happened here?
That's crazy because he got arrested with shoes too, but that's the conversation,
one shoe.
Yeah, right? It was one shoe because I remember that when
it was one shoe. It was one shoe. But I think the guy got his shoe and brought it to him. So and he was right back out. So to us, we're like, you guys scream all this stuff, their services, blah, 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 but there really isn't. right? And then there's the other part is that we've had elected officials who told us every year in this location, an increase of 200 people come to this location every year, which means that the numbers are getting higher and higher and higher. Meanwhile, there's no plan,
Right.
public safety plan.
And they're spreading out all over the city. Like, not to get you off, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's true, right? No plan. So we're out there demonstrating because we're saying, one, individuals deserve better.
Yes.
When we speak to individuals down there, they don't want to be pooping on your stoops. They don't want to be having sexual intercourse on your stoops. They don't want to be doing a lot of stuff that they do. They're incoherent majority of the time. Two, the community doesn't want to deal with it either, right? And this is not like no slight, no in a bad way, is that if you're a business owner, you're a homeowner, whatever, imagine your property, especially South-End and Roxbury, $1 million homes. And right now, with that situation, they're not worth $1 million.
Exactly.
So you're going to sell your home, right? Since we want to talk about literature, financial literature, you're not going to be able to sell $1 million home right now on Mass Ave for $1 million. And have you driven down Mass Ave lately?
Yep.
Look how many for sale signs are on Mass Ave.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. And this is something I bring up too in the conversation of profit. And it's not a slight against the community, but this has never been about profit per se, right? Because if this was about profit, we would see tiny homes up all over the city. Because if we're talking about property value, having homeless people sit on your stoops and have sex on your stoops, piss wherever they want, shit wherever they want, whatever may have you, actually lowers your property value, right? So in reality, what we would see is a lot of things going through like tiny homes or whatever may have you. But I feel like it is the city consciously ignoring these issues, and developers just not knowing how to get around the city. Because I don't even think developers want this, right? To be real, because not to talk about eyesores, but if you were to just look down the street along Mass Ave or even Melnea Cass, seeing hundreds of people herded by state police constantly it is an eyesore. It's not something that will drive up any type of property value, right? So when we're talking about this issue, it's like developers definitely need to get more involved than they have been, but because they still get city money and because the government gets to pay them off however they want to, that they're never going to get involved, right? This situation is never going to be solved because the government at every step of the way at least the city government every step of the way keeps getting involved in the wrong ways. Even the state governments, right? Or even other municipal governments where we have Quincy saying, no, we don't want to open up the island, when the issue is getting just as bad as for y'all as it is for us, as it has been for us, right? It's not making sense, because if we're talking about community development, our communities can't even really develop the way that they need to, so long as this issue is alive.
Exactly.
Right.
But you also probably got to think about, is this strategically designed, right? Because
absolutely it is. We already know this is.
Gentrification has been real. So for a lot of people also that don't know the history of the South End, my family's been in that location for over 30 years. My children's family's been in that location forever. So all of our ties are in that location. Is the South End and Roxbury. Since I came here from Puerto Rico at the age of 5, I've only lived in 2 communities, Roxbury and the South End. Nothing more, nothing less. So those are my communities. Whether I live there now or not, that's still my hood, and that's where my family's at. So I'm always going to claim Roxbury and the South End. So if people don't do research, the South End was a predominantly Black community all the way up until they swarmed it with crack, right? Crack came in, they gentrified the heck out of that community. People who have been living in that location forever, who couldn't afford now these new prices, had to literally sell their ancestors' homes, their families' home, who've been in that community forever, for way cheaper than what they bought it for, because crack was thrown in that community. So a lot of people don't know that the history of that location has been nothing but drug epidemics. Each drug in existence has been an epidemic in that location.
Very true.
And if you look at its strategic design, every year it's starting to look different. Sooner or later, they're going to try to remove any housing from that location. They're going to gentrify it, and it's either going to be not definitely a lot of people of color, or it's going to be a full medical location.
Right.
With more drug services, more everything, and it's just going to be a mess, right?
Yeah, I talk about this with my dad all the time too. Like, you're not going to find a primary care provider on the Melnea Cass side of BMC, right? You're not going to find a PCP. What you will find are different quote unquote rehabilitation programs, and I put quotation marks there for obvious reasons. And you'll find various nonprofits in the same area, in that immediate vicinity. And it's very telling of just Boston's overall, because BMC is a public hospital for folks who don't know, who's watching. And it's very telling of like the city's overall plans for the mile. It's like, let's just keep these people contained as best as we can from an architectural level, right? But that doesn't work. That doesn't work. We see the spilling into Mattapan. We see the spilling, past the South-End and Roxbury.
North End now is going to the North End. We're getting messages from people in the North End who are not happy. And imagine if that fully hits the North End. I'm just saying.
Listen, that money, the people with the money out there is going to be pissed.
Yup, they're going to organize fast.
Absolutely. Just like they did in Back Bay when developers were trying to tear down their own buildings, or were trying to build on certain like public parks, right? Yeah. And this is the difference that I want to talk about, like, because I love to talk about community finance too. This is the difference that money has on a community, right? Because when you push drugs into one community and then redline the hell of that community so that they have to leave, and they can't go into certain areas because you won't give them certain loans to go into certain areas, or because you blackball them from doing so. And Boston has a long history of doing this in every single neighborhood. There's not one Boston neighborhood that doesn't have a history with redlining, and that's also just something disgusting that has contributed to the issue. But when you look at all that, it's like the city itself collaborated in a way with banks themselves developers to develop this issue, to make this an issue. And it honestly worries me, because I'm looking at sort of like our areas now, like some of the more lower income areas inside of Boston. They're developing places like Mattapan and Lower Mills, like everywhere, right? Everywhere where you see lower income families, and now they're pushing us out of Boston into Brockton and surrounding towns. And again, this issue, it almost seems like it's beneficial to the city's plans to never address Methadone Mile. Right. And so this is why I started that chant, like, Kim Janey, where are you? Like,
everybody got smoke with her. I don't even know the chick. I don't even know half of these people, because I haven't really, like, honestly, Jeremy, this is the first time in my line of work that I've ever done something on a very controversial topic, right? I've always been I've been very bold and unapologetic, but this is the first time where I'm like, listen, I don't even care, because my mom's life is at risk. And I'm also familiar with the mile. I've had family who's been on the mile, right? And I know what that does to families. Because it's not just the person on the mile that's impacted, it's their families, their loved ones, their children, sisters, their brothers, their mothers, their fathers, right? Absolutely. So people don't talk about the financial burden of that part too, because we've been a family who tried it all, whether it was through the government issued health insurance, Mass Health, or was it through private coming out of our pockets, right? We've done it all, right? We know this, and unfortunately for my brother, my older brother, who's not here in Boston, but in another state, he's only alive because of prison.
No, right? Not true.
And other than that, he probably would have died of an overdose, straight up.
And that's the reality of a lot of lower income families, right? Like, my uncle was safer in a coma than he was on the street because of his own alcohol addiction, right? The dude was dying, like medically dying, at least twice a month, every other month. Well, every month, really, it got that bad. He only recently got better, but that's definitely one thing we don't talk about enough in these substance abuse conversations, is the financial burden, right? I think a lot of times in activism or in any of our work, people like to, figure out, like, call out like the social problems and call out like what's obvious. but not enough times do we actually dig into the deeper, financial, emotional, or individual problems faced by families. So I commend you for bringing the conversation there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people question my role. Like, how do you go from autism and disability to like Methadone Mile? And it's like, yo, it's a little personal to me too, right?
It's all connected too, and you really
it's like, exactly, like it's personal to me on two issues here. Is substance use is a disability. It's literally a disability. It's under the books as a disability, because when you do substances and we went from abuse to use, right? Because we're respecting language. It does things to your body, neurologically and developmental wise, right? And you might, after recovering from addiction, you may lose a lot of skills remembering things. You're going to end up with some long-term effects, right? So it falls under the umbrella of disabilities. And to some extent, there are, for those that don't know, for ADA, which is the American Disabilities Act, they cover substance use to some degree for those that are in treatment and are taking medication, but not for active users that are on our streets in public using a legal substance. So it helps you once you recover, so your employer can't fire you. You're taking medication for substance use and things like that. There's legal protection as someone who's in recovery under ADA laws. Like, it protects people with disabilities that are, physically incapable and, things like that. And I'm not even sure if I'm using the right words. So guys, please don't crucify me for this.
Nah, I feel like you're out here spitting facts. No one's gonna come into the language just being used,
And so that's that part, right? And then when we talk about the financial part, to wheel it back in, a lot of the work that we're doing on Mass and Cass, Methadone Mile, will always be Methadone Mile, as a community, is coming out of our pocket as a group. We're not a nonprofit. Right? So we are literally stakeholders of every field, whether we're, unemployed, self-employed, homeowners, working in the field of housing, working in the field of substance use, campaigning to become politicians. Literally, we reflect almost every level of stakeholdership in this conversation. We are funding our own flyers. We're funding our own work. Most recently, we launched a campaign because we're literally in group messages saying, yo, like, we don't got it like this. Like, we've already invested, almost $2,000 on shirts, another $1,000 on printing flyers and colors and canvassing and donations. And, so we're like literally like almost $6,000-7,000 in a hole from this work. Right. And so we want to do what we think is a pretty brilliant idea, by the way. It's campaign season, right? We want to campaign too. We want to join a political conversation. And we decided to launch a no plan, no vote campaign. So we fundraised it for $1,500. We got a little over $1,500. And we were able to purchase yard signs, bumper stickers, more flyers to canvass the community, because we do this on the regular. What else? More palm cards. I can't even remember. But we were so happy that people are watching our efforts and literally was donating $100, $200, $300, right? Because we're out there every Wednesday. And more than just once a week. We have different group members who are out there 3 or 4 times a week.
True.
Not including what we do on social media. So technically, every day of the week, we just doing some of this work. And so we launched that campaign, and it's unrestricted funds that are coming from the people, by the people, to really put a sense of urgency and say to those that are running for political seats who are incumbents and are coming back, is like, yo, y'all got to do something, because this has become unmanageable. Like, people are dying on methadone mile of overdoses. They're being stabbed. Women are being raped because there's serial rapists out there, right? And we all know, we hear stories about women that go missing on a mile and nobody knows where they're at. Where those stories at?
And the weird part about it is we hear nationwide stories about, you know, Black women's organs being harvested. We hear nationwide stories about just like, you know, sex trafficking for kids. And it's like these people go missing daily in Boston, right here in Boston. And we tell them their lives aren't valuable because we ignore them. Well, let me not say we, because, you know, when I say we, I'm talking about everybody else who don't donate their time, their money, or you know, their items, or even any part of their persons to this issue. Other people who see no stakeholdership or involvement in this issue tend to ignore a lot of the nationwide issues that are happening right in our back door. It's the same issue that we have with, you know, a lot of nationwide like cop killings of black and brown bodies, right? You guys, that same thing happens out here. Like, it happened in Randolph with Janelle and her son who was ran over by the Randolph police, right?
And I helped Janelle. Janelle was all over Facebook, right? And I'm like, yo, why nobody's responding to her? So I'm like, this needs to be all over the press. So I was one of the few people that was like, listen, let me make some magic happen. I'm not necessarily a public person when it comes to, you know, smoke with the police. I don't really get into that conversation because I'm like 50-50 on that conversation when it comes to certain things. Because at the end of the day, I want to be able to call the police for certain things, especially somebody trying to kill me. You know what I'm saying? So there's certain things, you know, other stuff we need to talk about because it's time that we talk about other conversations. Right. But I was like, Janelle, like, this needs to be all over the news. Like, this is just too much. Like, and she was out there demonstrating. So huge shout out to Janelle, man. Like, this mom,
she's out here doing it on her own. She's
out here
by
herself, the bullhorn, getting arrested and all, man.
Man, fighting charges on her own that are complete BS. Man, this woman is in it, and she's been in so long and so consistent with it, man. I didn't think this call was going to be this, but shout out to that dedication. You know, there's nothing more powerful than a mother's grief. Right? And she is the embodiment of that statement.
Yep.
And it shouldn't be like that. That's not a good thing. But shout out to her for staying in the work. Shout out to her for doing the damn thing. Consistency, you know. A lot of people, it's a lot fighting against the system, you know. As you see, right, as a community member, both and founder of Autism Sprinter, as one of the major leaders inside of the South-End Roxbury Partnership, and I really do hope to have a bunch of different folks on. Like, this work is hard, right? Yeah, I think that's like this also like kind of segues into one of these new projects I want to work on, especially like, you know, with my new position in the LP as operations director. I want to start a community forum where we have various community, well, not even just community leaders, but various community organizations and the people involved sit down in the room, maybe at a community center with a round table, or multiple tables, and we all talk about how we can get involved with each other's work. Because there is so much work happening in Boston, and it's disconnected. And a lot of the big names,
silos.
Very much so, and it's all because of political favors. It's all because of how people
want to get nobody mad.
Hello, and then people just are attention seekers in Boston too. We don't talk about that enough. Who aren't actually engaged in the work, but make it seem like they are. And we really need to just, as a community, focus on just how to be one unified voice, because all of our issues are connected, right? And that's what, again, with this rally and what I'm planning is about as well. But yeah, like. We as a community in Boston, period, need to do better to fight against all of these issues, right?
And I love that you're doing that, right, Jeremy? Because we need that. Because especially with Methadone Mile, we get attacked so much. There's a lot of stuff that people don't even see behind the scenes. Like, people don't even know a lot of the hate mail that we get on our social media messengers, like literally threatening our lives and everything, like legit. You know, we get people who call us NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And, you know, again, that has to be the most disrespectful and most stigmatizing word you can use on groups of people who have lived experience, because our group is comprised of people who are in recovery, right? People who have family or friends or had friends or family members on the mile.
People who are currently living that reality as well.
Exactly. And the fact that people feel so comfortable to tell a group of people, because the reality is when it comes to the footwork, the boots to the ground people, it's coming from the people whose bank account may not look like 3 digits numbers, right? Well, longer numbers, if you know what I mean. I don't think I have $300,000 in my bank account, right?
Neither do I. I'm gonna be real about that.
Exactly.
I ain't no rich. I'm not rich. Shit, I'm still living in the hood. Like,
last time I checked, I'm poor, like literally poor, right? But I'm showing up because it's inhumane. It's inhumane to the people that are out there, and it's inhumane to the communities being impacted by this. And the fact that we have to make decisions in how to lead efforts is sad to me. And I've learned this the hard way doing this, because it feels like, yo, you guys got to be careful with this. We get this all the time. Be careful. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't do that. I kind of like so-and-so. And I'm like, but what does this have to do with this work? Like, we know this is wrong. Why can't we say what needs to be said? Because we worried that if we say it, this politician is going to be mad. They may not respond to our email, which has happened. We have some politicians who, who worked in the police department, who have this history, not, worked in the court system, and has issue with the police, and very smart person, or other people that, have had seats at this table for some time, who have yet to respond to our emails. Right. Absolutely. And I know that these people may not appreciate us they being tagged on posts, but I mean, like, that's what we're doing, and it shouldn't be to a point that people like you and I can't speak up and say the concerns that are happening in our communities without feeling like there's going to be some form of retaliation, whether that be no callback, or a person like me, because one of the biggest things I fear is, how long am I going to be able to do my nonprofit doing this? Am I going to not receive funding source for my nonprofit because of this? Right. And I suspect that that's going to happen. But what people have to understand is that when it comes to safety, in a situation that we know is wrong, I could care less about anything else besides what's right. And what's right is for me to say, listen, the people on Mass and Cass deserve better. And my mom shouldn't be coming out of her community health center, walking back home and being robbed by someone who's incoherent, that has a needle full of blood, which may contain HIV or some communicable disease.
And that's
not fair.
It needs to be addressed, right? I think a lot of people in my movement don't see any kind of need for government intervention, or don't see any kind of need for this stuff. But when you have people, right, who can't think for themselves, or because they're in an altered state of mind, right, that way of thinking should become very different, right? Like, granted, don't get me wrong, the government has many issues and needs to be solved in many places, but this is an issue where we need actual action and an actual plan from the people in power. To bring up an experience that I had while serving food, Nancy, this might not have gone across many people's heads, because you're going to see stuff like that a lot in the work, but something that stuck with me was an older guy that came up. And he had his arm was kind of slashed. It was almost as if like he was trying to poke himself, but didn't know where to, and his blood was just kind of like flowing around in different spots. And I was just like, wow, this is the reality of the situation, right? And you can't blame him. You can't really do much about it. It's what is the city doing? What is the city doing to support these people? What are we doing as a community to support these people? Where is the community, right? Where is the community? Because locals, right? A lot of people living locally are just like, oh, ignore it. Or, oh, that's a crackhead. Just move to the other side of the street. No, we have to address the larger issues going on in Boston, because this has gone on too long. This is
over 30 years. And it's a government issue. They did this. The war on drugs, if you look at the Netflix, documentary, look at it. This was what we're going through with drugs was government it was done by the government. So I'm confused as to why people are saying we don't need the government to address something that they did. Right. They did this. Right. So we have to call them. So, and the other part is, so if I live in that area, because these are the things that I'm always thinking about. At one point in time, the community is going to get so upset. Mm-hmm. Are we going to put community members in a space where people are going to start buying guns to have in their house, whether it's legal or illegal? Mm-hmm. So that when somebody breaks into their house, who's their private property, they have to defend themselves. So then what's going to happen to a community resident who takes action on their own because they're tired of their car being broken into, they're tired of the packages being stolen, they're tired of people having sex on their property, injecting themselves on their property while leaving, like listen, I have to buy my mom bleach all the time. You'll see blood on my mom's steps outside, on her walls, on the steps, on the railing. So my mom, not only is she a resident, she's also a maintenance person. She don't get paid for that. Yeah. Right? So I fear that one day community residents are going to take on a challenge or take on this role and really hurt someone en masse and chaos and end up going to jail for protecting their family.
And that's the crazy part.
Something that's unmanageable. But meanwhile, it feels like, and this is again, please don't twist my words, people. It feels like the individuals on mass and cast have free reign to do what they want to do in the community with no repercussion. But then if the community decides to protect themselves, I guarantee you somebody's going to go to jail and they're going to do time for it.
Because if someone high off whatever they've been doing, has any kind of weapon on them and goes after your kid, right? And then you defend your kid's life, you defend your kid in any way, and you end up really hurting someone, you're most likely gonna go to jail. Right? Like that's the reality of the situation happening, and it happens constantly. I know on the call we have a community member who constantly brings this up, especially with the community defending itself, right? Because he verbatim mentioned, if this keeps going on in my backyard, I'm gonna have me and my boys handle this issue ourselves, right? Not saying it. Well, again, I probably shouldn't say that's what he said verbatim because he said a lot more, but.
But I mean, those are the thoughts of people that are having though, Jeremy.
And it's real. It's real. It's real and raw.
If you're from a certain demographics, a group of people, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, at one point you're going to get tired. You're going to take matters into your own hands. Right. And this is just a real conversation that I feel like nobody even wants to talk about because everyone, wants to make it feel like if we have pretty conversations on this, everything's going to go away. And that's where my problem is, that everybody's be positive, be positive.
No, you're right.
There's nothing positive about what's happening on Mass and Cass. Nothing. It's not comfortable. So I don't even know why they would name it a comfort station. That's not comfortable.
I think it's the same kind of politics that people play when they talk about Malcolm X versus MLK, right? The movement needs it all. There isn't just no one way to handle this. There isn't no just one way to keep everything pristine and prim and cute for the public when the reality of the situation itself isn't cute. For instance, when we saw George Floyd, like, would you say that about the George Floyd video? When the reality of the situation was Derek Chauvin kneeled on dude's neck, put his entire body weight on dude's neck, and we all had to watch that. But you see what we see.
I'm not live. We watched the video.
Right.
Like, people make it make sense. That's what I'm saying.
This is never going to be cute.
It makes sense.
Solutions and these conversations, these solutions are never going to look cute, but they need to happen. This is the and a lot of people don't like when I say this, but market corrections, right? Because I view exactly like what we're dealing with socially as a form of a market, right? Right now, people are being screwed over by the government and the community is getting tired of it. A correction from the community could look like pressure on government. A correction from the community could also look like pressure on the people who are experiencing living on the mile, right? Mm-hmm. However it goes, it's not gonna be pretty, and the conversations aren't gonna be cute that erupt out of it. Because if someone does hurt someone from the mile, or lets loose, that's going to be an actual conversation. And it's not to say like, oh, it should happen, but if it happens, that's going to be a real conversation we're going to have as a city, right? As an entire community. And if we keep putting pressure on government, obviously we're going to keep having these conversations that might lead to something. But again, it's all kind of this. Politics is a disgusting game. It really is.
Honestly, I was into politics, but I will tell you, doing this work, I have a different kind of thoughts on politics. And I'm not a huge fan of it anymore because I feel like it's all games. Like people play a lot of games, right?
Yeah.
A lot of clout chasing, a lot of resume building. And I might be wrong because I don't know what happens in the in-house. I just know from the outside, to me, is like a 30-year-old issue can't go 30 more years unaddressed. And I personally have a big issue with this progressive agenda, right? I keep saying this. I don't like that word. There's some things that I can move behind, but there's a lot of things I can't move behind. And so to me, it's like one of the examples I keep giving. How are you living in a high crime neighborhood and your car insurance is higher than living in the suburbs?
That part.
Right? I don't get it. Make it make sense, right? So to me is we got to think about how some of these policies, are they really supporting the work or are they harming the community even more? We have a location that gives out thousands and thousands of needles a day. People don't require identification. They don't require anything. And meanwhile, we find thousands and thousands of needles in our communities with a team that started with 4, that went to 6, now to 8. And 8 individuals are responsible for a course of a day and a working day, because I don't think they work 24 hours, to pick up thousands of needles in one location. And it's based on you basically putting in 311 complaints for people to actually show up to pick up these needles. Make it make sense. So there's just so much inconsistency in this work that it's remotely impossible to trust anyone. And another thing is, the Mass and Cast Task Force is designed to address this issue, was created in 2019. We in 2021. Their meetings are not public. You and I cannot register to enter those meetings as a constituent or as a community resident. You cannot find meeting minutes available to you and I so that we can keep up to what conversations that they're having, right? We can't find that. Group members and a journalist last year asked for meeting minutes. We have them in our Facebook group. They don't look consistent. And truth be told, our representative elected officials are very inconsistent in attending those meetings. So we literally have no representation at the table. The South-End dominates 4 seats, Roxbury 2, and that's with 1 elected official. Make it make sense, right? And so these are the things that are frustrating for people like us who are trying to figure out, how do we have a construction company, Suffolk Construction, on the Mass and Cast Task Force, if there's really not behind the scenes a bigger plan for something to happen around safe injection sites or whatever the case may be, or the state-of-the-art engagement center that's being built, right? Without communicating to the community in hopes that those 4 residents from the South-End, 1 resident from Roxbury will relate tons of information to over thousands of people.
No, you're absolutely right. And there's no excuse for that within the city of Boston, right? this is one of my, not I don't want to get too political, but this is one of my major problems with the current sitting mayor, right? You just got this role and your immediate move was to start campaigning for more time rather than actually address issues that our communities are facing. It's like you are one of the first blacks. We're still in that first black era, right? You are the first black woman at that in the mayoral seat. It's disheartening, to not see the work and not see what needs to be being pushed through. We have heard nothing about the Long Island solution since Kim Janey's been in office. We've heard nothing about, anything regarding police brutality in Boston or anything regarding like anything surrounding police from her office.
Kim Janey, I'll tell you the only issue that I've had, and I again don't know Kim Janey. We had a meeting with her, which she wanted to facilitate. All the other meetings that we had with elected officials was led by our org, right? Our grassroots org, right? She was the only meeting that she dictated, and she allowed me and another person from the South End to help co-facilitate. We were asking questions that we took hours to put together to make sure we asked her. The meeting was exactly an hour. We kept asking, what's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan? She seemed like first of all, did not even want to talk about that. And as I'm telling her, I'm like, listen, my mom's safety can't like be compromised. And she goes, okay, well, I have another meeting to go to, or have to watch a show or something. Like literally just cut me off. First of all, that ticked the squad off. To me, I'm just like, you know what? Like, whatever, man. Like,
right, because it happened to you, right?
Yeah, to me, but honestly, everyone was mad, but to me, I was like, whatever. I was really mad. And we ended up doing a live show with James, which I probably regret doing. But that day, because I was red, my cheeks were red. And at that moment, I just determined in my head, she's not someone that I would want to ever speak to again. Because she told me at that moment, without telling me, that my mom's safety did not matter to her.
That's real.
So, and that's that. And that's all I can say about her. And this is, again, no slight to her work or what she's done, because I don't know her. I don't follow her. Right? As far as what she's done for the community. And another part of this conversation is that we have to understand that just because they're elected officials of color doesn't mean that we don't hold them to task like we will hold other politicians to task. And I need people to stop thinking with that mindset, that because we are people of color, I can't hit you up. It could be done differently. But if I see that you're on here, Jeremy, and I built a relationship with you and you say something, I'm gonna hit you up and be like, yo, Jeremy, like, yo, bro, what's up? Right? Because I want to see you do better as a Black man, right? Just as I would hope that if I say something that you hit me up and say, Yahaira, like, listen, whatever, can we talk about this? Because I want you to hold me to task and make sure that I do better.
Yeah, it's just like when your friend's breath is stinking and you don't tell them, are you really their friend? Right? Like, do you really care about their future? Or are you really invested in that person? Right?
Yeah.
And I think we as a community really have issues with that, because we think that correcting people is equivalent to bashing them, right? Or rashing them or flaming them, roasting them, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're used to doing. And we really need to reframe our minds around what that looks like, right? What correcting each other looks like. But again, this is no slight to Kim Janey. Like you said, I don't really follow her. It's just from what I've heard, what I've seen.
There's a lot of smoke over there.
Oh Lord. Oh man. But yeah, so it is 7:30. Wow.
But I'm available.
Listen, we gotta have this conversation. We gotta continue it. Definitely, please, if you're watching and you haven't already, please follow Autism Sprinter and please join the South-End Roxbury Partnership group, like the page. Do anything you can to support. If you don't have money, please donate time. If you don't have time, please donate clothes, food, different resources to the community, to their efforts. Like I said, we're all stakeholders as Bostonians, as citizens of Massachusetts. Period. We're all involved in this issue. And so, with that, I want to leave any final remarks up to Yahaira herself.
So I don't really have much to say besides thank you, Jeremy, for having me in your platform. I love the work that you're doing. We need to have more conversations like this around the financial literacy, because we can no longer keep moving in spaces when our communities are being taken from us. And, we need to set more groundwork and foundations in our community to build on a multi-layer platform. So thank you for having me here. Like he said, follow us, Roxbury, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We have a Facebook group called the South-End Roxbury Community Partnership 2.0. And for Autism Sprinter, it literally is Autism Sprinter. And you'll find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And if you have a loved one with a child who has autism and want to talk to other parents and very public about their situation, join our Facebook group. You'll find parents from all over the world who can give you information on how to get free diapers, to get a speech device, which is a whole, things that we need to make sure communities are aware of. Please follow us, and we would love to build with you. And if you're caring, like Jeremy said, if you're interested in donating to either Autism Sprinter or South-End Roxbury Community Partnership, just go to the pages. You'll find the donation links there. And again, Jeremy, thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. I want to have you again. This is a really, really, really good conversation. And I hope people even tune into the issue nationally. I hope people come through, because this is an issue that needs to be addressed. This is a city with a lot going on, right? But yeah.
All right. Good night, y'all.
Night, y'all.